To clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, an explosive row between President Donald Trump and Piers Morgan all over this dossier I delivered to Trump a couple of weeks ago. I'll tell you the full story. So John Curtis will join me. We're 2 weeks away from very important local elections, but no one seems to be talking about them. And joining me on Talking Pints tonight, a Premier League footballer who fell from grace and finished up in prison. An interesting tale, Mark Ward. Before all of that and my big explanation, let's get the news.
And the top story tonight on GB News, Boris Johnson will face a parliamentary investigation into whether he misled the Commons over parties held at Downing Street during lockdown.
The question is, as on the order papers, many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
That was the Commons this afternoon. After there were no objections to a Labour motion, it passed without a vote. The Prime Minister will now face a contempt probe by the Privileges Committee once police complete their investigation into COVID rule breaches. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner told the Commons Boris Johnson's behaviour goes against democratic principles.
Politicians, political parties and Prime Ministers will come and go, Mr Deputy Speaker, but the basic principle that elected representatives must tell the truth and act with integrity remain the foundation of our very democracy. But the Prime Minister and his supporters have tested these principles to the limit.
Well, the Prime Minister, who's currently in India, insists he has absolutely nothing to hide. Boris Johnson is on a trade visit to the country to try to strengthen ties there. Meanwhile, the Met Police says there will be no further updates on Partygate fines until after May's local elections. The force says investigations into Downing Street and Whitehall parties will continue during the pre-election period, but no new statements will be issued. In other news, a mass grave site near the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol has been expanded in recent weeks, according to private US intelligence experts. Satellite pictures from near to the port city reportedly show more than 200 fresh graves have been dug in the last month. President Putin, meanwhile, is claiming victory in the city and has ordered a blockade of a steel plant where hundreds of Ukrainian troops and civilians are currently sheltering. President Biden says there's no evidence Mariupol has fallen and Ukrainians do need support against Russia's latest assault.
Now they've launched and refocused their campaign to seize new territory in eastern Ukraine. And we're in a critical window now of time where they're going to set the stage for the next phase of this war. And the United States and our allies and partners are moving as fast as possible to continue to provide Ukraine the forces that they need, the weapons they need, the equipment they need. Their forces need to defend their nation.
Here, a social services investigation is underway into the murder of 5-year-old Logan Mwangi to establish whether anything could have been done to save his life. Today, his mother, stepfather and a 14-year-old boy were all found guilty of his killing in July last year. Just a month before his death, social workers in Bridgend removed him from the Child Protection Register, believing he was no longer at risk of serious harm. Outside court, Logan's father, Benjamin Mwangi, said his son's life had been tragically cut short.
The world is a colder and darker place without his smile and happy energy in which he lived his life. I loved him so much, and somehow I have to live my life knowing that I will never get to see him grow up to the wonderful man I knew that he could be.
Logan Mwangi's dad. A man has been found guilty of murder more than 27 years after killing 6-year-old Ricky Neve. James Watson was 13 when he strangled the schoolboy in woods near his Peterborough home in 1994. Ricky's mother, who was originally accused of being involved, described him as a monster. The 41-year-old will be sentenced next month. Former Assistant Chief Constable Paul Fulwood says they were determined to give Ricky's family justice.
Today we finally secured justice for Ricky and his family, following an almost 30-year battle to find the truth. For years, he thought he'd gotten away with the most horrendous crime, but today's results show you cannot hide forever.
The Queen's 96th birthday has been marked by a 41 gun salute in London's Hyde Park today. Well, Her Majesty won't have heard that. She's not in the capital today, choosing instead to spend the day at Sandringham in Norfolk in a cottage loved by her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. And a new photograph has been released to celebrate her birthday. Taken last month in the grounds of Windsor Castle, the monarch is pictured with 2 of her fell ponies. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Let's all wish Her Majesty the Queen a very happy 96th birthday and long, long may she reign over us. That picture taken earlier on today. And what an incredible woman she is, without doubt, the most respected human being in the world. Now, overnight, there has been something of a sensational media row. And there it is, the Sun newspaper, grumpy, Trumpy, world exclusive. Ex-Pres storms out on Morgan. What's it all about? Well, I'll tell you. 2 weeks ago today, I was at Mar-a-Lago. I met with President Trump. I was there for a social dinner afterwards. I knew that Piers Morgan, with his new TV show coming up, would make a beeline for Trump. He has, for years, boasted in the British media that he has unique access to the president, that he knows him, that he's a friend, and he can dial his number any time he likes. And I knew that Morgan would play on that. What I also knew was that President Trump would probably, being the busy man that he is, just not be aware of actually what Piers Morgan had been saying about him throughout 2020 and 2021. And so, yes, I did put a dossier on Trump's desk, and here it is, all 3 pages of it. And all it does is tell the truth that Morgan has been saying about his so-called friend, things like he behaves like a mafia mob boss, that he is deluded, boastful, petty, spiteful, an emperor with no clothes. He cannot be trusted with access to the nuclear codes, and on and on and on. He calls him a despicable lunatic. And I thought Trump ought to know the truth. And that is what that was intended to do. Because you know what? I'm sick of people who get close to President Trump and somehow they use that position. They use that position to benefit themselves and to do down Trump himself. So I thought a little bit of truth was the right thing. Trump indeed did hand the dossier back to Piers Morgan and said it would be a souvenir of his treachery. Now, I think all of that was bad enough, but it kind of gets a little bit worse, because here's the point about that Sun front page. Ex-Pres storms out on Morgan. So the impression was given in this newspaper and elsewhere that Trump had lost his rag and stormed out of the interview with Piers Morgan because he simply couldn't take it. Well, I tell you what, there's only one way to describe that news headline. It's very simple. It is fake news. And here's why. Here's the audio of actually what happened.
Because they own the club, I'm sure it happened.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for a great interview.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
That was a great interview. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So the interview's over. Morgan says, thank you. That was a great interview. Trump says, yeah, it's over. It's done. Trump stands off. He's off to his next appointment, and he says, turn the cameras off. There is no way, there is absolutely no way at all that Trump stormed out of that meeting. That is a completely inaccurate, dishonest representation of what happened. Trump has responded with a statement. He says, Piers Morgan, like the rest of the fake news media, attempted to unlawfully and deceptively edit his long and tedious interview with me. He wanted to make it look like I walked out on the interview when my time limit of 20 minutes went over by an hour. The good news is the interview was taped by us as a means of keeping him honest. The interview was actually very strong, and he goes on to say that he went out of his way to deceptively edit an interview and got caught. That's a big story, isn't it? Well, what are the consequences? What are the consequences of this? Well, there's only one recent example I can think of. It happened in 2007 when the Queen was doing a photo shoot. And the BBC showed pictures that suggested the Queen had walked out of the photo shoot before it ended. It was known as Crown Gate, and it was a huge scandal at the time. The newspapers were full of it. And in the end, the boss of the BBC was forced to resign. I don't know what will happen here. I don't know what will happen here in this case. But what I do know is that there'll be many within Rupert Murdoch's media empire that will not be happy about what's happened at all. Many at Fox News, who over the course of the last few weeks have had Piers Morgan appearing on their shows because he is going to be doing a weekly Fox News broadcast. And there are so many of those presenters and producers within Fox that are big supporters of Donald Trump, and they're going to be simply appalled by this. And why would guests go on with him if they're going to get stitched up like this? Indeed, Caitlyn Jenner, who was due to appear next Wednesday with Morgan, has already decided that that's just not what she wants to do. You'd have thought in the face of all of this, there might have been some sort of apology from Piers Morgan. But no, he's decided to fight Twitter wars with all and sundry, including me. Now, I have been called many things over the years, but this is a new one. Piers Morgan describes me as a dodgy guy. Yeah, that's what he says. He sends this message to Taylor, who is the spokesman for President Trump, and says, yeah, you know, you've relied on some dodgy bloke in London. Well, all I can say, Mr. Morgan, is that if I'm a dodgy guy, the words to describe you I would not be allowed to use before the watershed this evening. So that's the full truth of the story. Yes, I did present a dossier to Donald Trump because I thought he deserved to know the truth. I thought he deserved to know that Morgan wasn't really his friend, just happy to use him as and when it suited. Now, I want your responses to this. Tell me, what do you think about this saga? Let me know. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, Matt Boyle is the Washington bureau chief for Breitbart News. And Matt, you broke this story. It was kind of 10, 11 o'clock UK time. You broke this story. You spoke to the Mar-a-Lago office. You spoke to Trump's spokesman. How did you first get to hear about this?
Well, look, we saw the headlines out there just like everybody else. We saw the 30-second clip that Piers Morgan released. And when I saw that, I called Trump's team and I'm like, hey, guys, what happened here? What's the real truth about this? They're like, hang on, trust us, this is not the way that it happened. And so then a short time later, they provided the audio of the actual end of the interview. The clip, which anybody can go listen to, we've published the whole thing on Breitbart.com, is 7.5 minutes long. 7.5 minutes long of an audio clip of this thing. Now, this is more than an hour into the interview that Trump has already sat for with Piers Morgan. So Trump had agreed to do a 20-minute interview with Piers Morgan. More than an hour into the interview, so Piers Morgan goes over by 40 minutes. Trump's team says, all right, time to wrap it up, last question. Piers Morgan just kind of keeps going, right? Like, he keeps asking more and more questions. Some of them are interesting. Some of them are decent questions. Not all the questions are unfair. Trump has, some back and forth with it. He disagrees with Morgan on some things. He agrees with him on other things. He kind of liked some of the questions. You can hear a big part of the interview there. But the idea that Trump ripped off his microphone, stood up and stormed out of the interview, that's just blatantly untrue. And again, I've never, in the 11, 12 years that I've been doing this, I haven't seen an interview this badly mischaracterized and misleadingly and deceptively edited as bad as this one is. It's so blatantly untrue, that 30-second clip that Piers Morgan released. This
Matt, I mean, it is the most disgraceful kind of journalism. But just a final thought on this, and thanks for coming on. Generally, I've noticed that journalists tend to defend other journalists, even from rival publications with different political opinions. Is there some backlash to this coming in US media today?
Yeah, there already is. NBC News, CNN have all come out and criticized the way that Piers Morgan did this. CNN, which is his former employer, did a story about how he handed Donald Trump a win. And so, the big thing I would hope, because, I work for Breitbart, I'm a huge supporter of President Trump. Yeah. I would hope that President Trump doesn't, look, Piers, Nigel, you were 100% correct with that dossier that you gave to President Trump about Piers Morgan. He was just wrong to sit down with Piers Morgan. I hope that President Trump learns from this and doesn't keep doing interviews with establishment.
Yeah, well, I did try, Matt. I did try to warn him. One final quick last thought. Fox News cannot be happy about this.
I would imagine that they're upset. I haven't heard from anybody there. Their spokesperson just said that they don't have anything to add other than what Piers Morgan had already said in the pre-released clip and a column that he wrote for the New York Post. And their coverage of this has kind of been all over the place. So we'll see how that plays out over the coming days.
We sure will. Matt Boyle, Breitbart News, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening here on GB News. Now, to domestic politics. It has been a very tough day for the Prime Minister. Very tough indeed. In fact, let's go to Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. So, Darren, in short, and you're there down in College Green in Westminster, in short, Labour were putting forward a motion for debate and vote in the House of Commons, and this was to refer the Prime Minister to the Standards Committee. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, indeed. As you say, Labour wanting to see Boris Johnson looked into, if you like, by the Privileges Committee to see whether he misled MPs, whether he lied to Parliament effectively, which under the Ministerial Code would be a resigning matter. Now, when Labour put forward this motion, the Conservatives made it clear that they were going to oppose it, that they wanted their MPs to oppose it. And in theory, given the governing party, Nigel, with a nearly 80-seat majority, they could have easily defeated this motion. But then today, this morning, it became pretty clear that actually lots of Conservative MPs were not prepared to oppose this motion. They wanted the investigation to happen by the Privileges Committee. They didn't want to appear to be covering anything up. Many were prepared simply to abstained, in all of this.
Yep.
And in the end, the Conservative Party had to back down, knowing they didn't have the numbers. So quite humiliating, if you like, that the government had to do a massive U-turn. And then the measure's gone through in the nod. And so that investigation by MPs, dragging this process out even further, will now take place after the Mets conclude their investigation, and they revealed today that they're not going to give us any more updates on who's been fined, if anyone, until after the local elections in a couple of weeks' time. So this idea that this story, this scandal, is going away, well, it really, really isn't.
No, I know. I know some people at home are really frustrated and really angry and say there are more important things to talk about. But as you say, it's not going away. And just a final thought, there was quite a strong intervention today by Steve Baker, who's a very prominent backbencher with quite a lot of popularity, I think, amongst the Conservative members. Just brief us quickly on what Baker had to say.
Yeah, Dee, just first of all, just to reflect what the Prime Minister was saying today, because of course he is in India, he's insistent he's not trying to hide anything, that people it's up to them to make their own minds up, but that he wants to focus on, as you say, what lots of our viewers think should be happening on the cost of living crisis and on Ukraine. But you then add to the fact that William Ragg, perhaps unsurprisingly, but more surprisingly, Steve Baker, who had only given him his support 2 days ago, came out today and said that the Prime Minister needs to go, he needs to resign. I mean, you know, that is difficult. Steve Baker, he's a Brexiteer. You can't really claim that this is simply a Remainer conspiracy, if you like. He is a senior MP. He's well liked by the Conservative base. Is it damaging? You bet it is. Does it shift the dial? It does a bit. I think, again, there is a sense, just a sense at this moment in time, that the momentum against Boris, the uneasiness, the frustration is starting to build again in the Conservative Party. And as I say, given the fact we've got local elections, potentially more fines, the Sugre report and this new Privileges Committee investigation, it's going to be pretty tricky for the Prime Minister over the next month or so.
No, it certainly is. Darren, thank you very much indeed. And, as Darren says, it's exactly 2 weeks to the local elections. In a moment, I will have Sir John Curtis on. We'll talk about those elections and what to look for. We'll also have an interview with the Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries. She's been interviewed. It'll be played out later this evening, but we're going to get a sneak preview of what she has to say about Alistair Campbell.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I asked for your reactions to the furious row that has broken out between Donald Trump and Piers Morgan as a result of the dossier of facts, of truths that I gave to President Trump and the fake news front page on The Sun newspaper. Ryan says the fact that Piers didn't say these things to Trump's face shows he has no backbone. Gareth says, well done, Nigel, for exposing Piers Morgan again, for trying to jeopardise President Trump from running again. Adrian says, on the basis that Piers Morgan has blocked me and Farage, rather like Mrs Thatcher, not only tolerates but rather enjoys robust argument, I'd say Farage was right to inform Trump. All I was doing was giving him a truth that he wouldn't have known. He doesn't spend his time reading columns in the Daily Mail. He just doesn't. Julie says, well done, Nigel, for not letting your friend walk into a trap. I'd have done the same thing. I just wish he hadn't done the interview at all, but hey. Pat says, I owe you at least one drink for exposing Morgan. Well, it's not the first time Piers has had problems, but I don't think this is necessarily a great start. Now, 2 weeks from now, we have got local elections taking place in all parts of the United Kingdom. They may not be there for every voter, but they're still really very, very important. And yet there's been almost no debate. It seems to be no national debate. I mean, locally, yes, but no national debate about them at all. And so I'm very, very pleased to say that joining me to try and unpeel some of this, to explain to you what matters around the country and where we should be looking on that morning of May the 6th is Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Nigel.
So let's start off with Northern Ireland. What's happening in Northern Ireland?
Well, the Northern Irish election is probably the most important of all. There we have an election to the devolved assembly, and of course the First Minister from the DUP, Paul Girvan, resigned a few weeks ago in protest about the continuing checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland in the wake of the Northern Ireland Protocol that forms part of the Brexit agreement that Boris Johnson negotiated with the European Union. The UK government has been trying to get that protocol, well, amended, stroke its operation made less strict. The DUP are particularly upset about the fact that this, they feel, makes it more difficult for people to do economic business across the Irish Sea.
Yeah.
And because of the way in which basically many voters in Northern Ireland feel that the DUP were double-crossed by Boris Johnson, they're blaming the DUP. And as a result of that, the opinion polls for some time in Northern Ireland have been saying that Sinn Féin are likely to emerge as the largest party. Not necessarily because Sinn Féin vote's going to go up, they don't expect to get about a quarter of the vote, but because of the DUP vote going down, the vote being fragmented between it and two other unionist parties, the Ulster Unionists and the traditional unionists, and the potential difficulty and the headache that might face the UK government is, will the DUP be willing to form, to take the position of Deputy First Minister, which is the one to which they will be entitled if they come second, with Sinn Féin taking the position of First Minister for the first time. The DUP might be reluctant to form an administration anyway until the relationship with the European Union over the Northern Ireland Protocol has been improved from their point of view. Playing second fiddle, albeit nominally, to Sinn Féin might just be the one thing that makes it difficult, impossible for them to do so. So Northern Ireland might find itself in the midst of another political impasse in the wake of the election.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Scotland has elections, local elections. Wales has local elections. Parts of England have local elections, including, of course, all of the councils in Greater London. What are the most important things to look for across the rest of the UK?
Well, let's start with my neck of the woods, Scotland. In Scotland, the elections that are taking place were last fought over in 2017. We use a system of proportional representation, but apart from that, it's fairly straightforward. There are two interesting points about what's going to happen in Scotland. Back in 2017, the Conservatives did very well north of the border by their standards. They got 25% of the first preference vote. And the elections were just 6 weeks before the UK general election. which of course in general was a disappointment for Theresa May. She failed to get an overall majority. But in Scotland, the Conservatives reached their high point of the devolution era with around 28-29% of the vote. The problem they now face, they've got to defend that baseline. And the polls north of the border, really since November, December, have been saying that the Conservatives have fallen behind Labour, that Labour may end up being the second largest party. And if that were to happen, it will be the first time since 2016. And we again will be back to an argument about which is the principal unionist voice north of the border, and the fragmentation politically of unionism north of the border would, I think, be exacerbated.
Yep.
The second thing we're looking out for is how well do the SNP do. They actually did disappointingly in 2017. They did no better than they had done in 2012. They ought to do better. And as a result, therefore, it may be relatively easy for them to at least make the claim that this is evidence that support for independence in Scotland is rising. Whether that claim will be right or not is another matter, but this is a relatively easy wicket for them.
Yeah.
Wales more difficult. The truth is that in Wales, outside of Cardiff, the elections are not fought that widely on a party political basis. But there were some disappointing results for Labour in Wales. For example, they failed to win Blaenau Gwent to retain control of it. That's something they ought to be able to revert. Let's now come to England. Now, it's two very different set of elections. In London, it's a whole council election. All the seats are up for grabs for the London boroughs. And you might therefore think that this is the place where we might get significant changes of control. However, London is already, for many respects, a one-party state. The Conservatives only control 7 of the 32 councils in London. There are a couple that are vulnerable. One is Wandsworth, the other is Barnet. Now, Barnet, frankly, Labour should have won in 2018, but because of the anti-Semitism row under Jeremy Corbyn in what is the most part of the country, Labour didn't win. They ought to pick it up this time. Wandsworth for the Conservatives is iconic. They've held it since 1978, often against the grain. And in 1990, the hold by the Conservatives on that occasion, together with Westminster against the odds, enabled the Conservatives to persuade people that actually Margaret Thatcher was not an electoral liability, a decision that in the end, however, unravelled a few months later when she was challenged and lost the premiership in the autumn. Outside of London, however, we have to be aware that for most councils, only 1/3 of the seats up for grabs, which makes it relatively difficult for there to be much in the way of headline changes of control. And both London and outside of London, we should also remember that the 2018 elections, which is the baseline for the elections in England, was actually the best local elections for Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. So the Conservatives are not defending a particularly good set of results. Now, given where the Conservatives currently are in the polls, we would still expect them to be losing ground. They were even Stevens with Labour back in 2018. They're definitely behind at the moment. They have been for months. But we're not necessarily talking about really large changes of swings to Labour.
Yes.
And therefore, given not all that many seats are up for grabs, we're not necessarily talking about stupendous Conservative losses, even if the recent message of the opinion polls were to be verified.
Yeah, and of course, with these sort of elections and the complexity, thirds and all the rest of it, you generally find the next day that all parties claim they've had a fantastic evening.
Absolutely. I think you can expect that's guaranteed.
John, one final thought. I was very interested looking at the polling that came out overnight, the YouGov polling that went sector by sector. And you see that on areas like tackling the deficit and managing the economy, the Tories are still just about ahead. Although, on managing the economy, they were 30 points ahead a couple of years ago. Now they're neck and neck. But on everything else, like helping people onto the housing ladder, like dealing with poverty, like standards of living, keeping prices down, it would appear to me that Labour is opening up a lead over the Conservative on economic issues.
I think the answer to Nigel is there are a couple of things going on here. One is, once a party is ahead in the polls, which Labour is, and at the moment it's about 8 points ahead in the polls, people start to say that party is better at everything. So in part, this is, as it were, a consequence of Labour's increased popularity and the declining popularity of the Conservatives. But there is no doubt that on the economy, the Conservative and the cost of living crisis in particular, the Conservatives are finding it difficult to persuade voters that they're dealing with things adequately. The spring statement, well, people like the individual measures, but the reaction was this is an inadequate response to the pressures that we are facing. And although YouGov only find on the economy it's still neck and neck, other pollsters are saying actually Labour are somewhat ahead. So certainly the Conservatives cannot say to themselves, well, if we can persuade the public that the real issue is the cost of living crisis and not Partygate, but that's necessarily the road to salvation and recovery in the opinion polls. The problem is that at the moment the Conservatives face difficulty both on, as it were, the political froth of Partygate, but also on the key substantive issue of the economy and cost of living. So there is no doubt the challenge facing Boris Johnson's administration electorally is the biggest that it's been facing ever since December 2019.
Absolutely. Sir John Curtis, thank you for that summation of what's going on around the United Kingdom in what are going to be an important set of elections in 2 weeks' time. Well, what the Farage moment. Netflix, we all thought it was booming, doing wonderfully, but suddenly it's losing subscribers. That may well be because people don't have quite as much disposable income. But there's another reason. Has Netflix become too political? Has it become too liberal? Well, Elon Musk, never out of the news these days, tweeted, "The woke mind virus is making Netflix unwatchable." And into the process, their share price fell by 36% yesterday. Now, Nadine Dorries, Culture Secretary, this is what she said when she was interviewed earlier by Dan Wootton for GB News, and the whole interview will play out later on this evening. But have a listen to this.
Alistair Campbell has a long history of attacking me personally. He's one of those men, I'm afraid, who can't accept women from my background doing well. He's, quite abusively attacked me for many years. He hates anybody who is pro-Brexit. And so I'm afraid, for me, it kind of runs off my back like water would from a duck's. It's a bit like when I got my job, when I was promoted to this role, to take those difficult decisions. I mean, the Prime Minister knew what he was doing when he put me in here. He knows I'm not somebody to do the hard yards. So whether it's online safety or the BBC or Channel 4, he knew what he was doing. And I knew what I was doing when I decided that we were going to move ahead with a bill that's been in this department also for 6 years, the online safety bill, that we were going to move ahead with another policy that's been hanging around for years, which is sell Channel 4, because there are many reasons why that should happen now. And on the BBC, and of course, I've become almost a hate figure of the left for doing it.
Well, there's no holding back, is there, when Nadine Dorries is speaking? Watch the interview in full on Dan Wootton tonight at 9 p.m. Some more reactions to the Piers Morgan, Donald Trump, I suppose Nigel Farage row too. Pamela says, "I will not be watching Piers Morgan's new show. Well done for putting things straight." Andy says, "Some people are desperate. They can see that Trump is coming back." Interesting. There were some polls out today that suggested that he's now a couple of points ahead of Biden if there were to be an election tomorrow. One viewer says, "I usually agree with you, but you are practically Trump brainwashed." I don't really get that. I fully accept criticism. All I did was tell him the truth. What's wrong with that, for goodness sake? Sunlight is a great disinfectant. Simon says, "Well done, Nigel. Nice to see some people still have morals." Rachel says, "Piers needed airtime and is scraping the barrel to get that airtime." Well, tell you what, he's certainly getting publicity. I'm just not sure that it's very good. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be joined by a guy who fought his way up, became a Premier League footballer. It wasn't easy to get there. And then later on, it all went wrong and he went to prison. So we'll talk about what life's like, going from obscurity to fame to disgrace. I'll be joined by former Premier League footballer Mark Ward.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's the best time of the day. Yes, the GB News Tavern is open. It's time for Talking Pints. I'm going to be joined tonight by Mark Ward, former Premier League footballer who played at Man City, Everton and West Ham. Here he is, playing in the Merseyside derby when Everton beat Liverpool 2-0 in 1993.
Hinchcliffe can really veer the ball in with his left foot. Does it with pace and swerve, but McManaman only to Mark Ward. It's in through the crowd like an arrow into the corner of the Liverpool net. Mark Ward has scored it after poor defending at the corner, taken by Hinchcliffe. It wasn't really what he would have wanted, but McManaman just flapped at that and only succeeded in setting it up for Ward, who hit it hard and true past a furious Grobbelaar.
Well, I got to say, Mark, well, what a goal! Fantastic. And I'm guessing in a Merseyside derby, that's got to be a bit special, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it was, for a Scouser to score in the derby. It was a dream come true,
Yeah.
And a guest of yours recently, Tony Cottage, scored the second goal and we went on to win the game. It was a fantastic performance on the day.
It was. Your story, it's interesting, isn't it? Because those that don't know football and they're looking today at the Premier League and they're seeing these young guys earning extraordinary sums of money. And it's like you'd imagine they're picked out as teenage talent and they're straight in and life's really easy. But for you, as a young lad that wanted to play football, it wasn't quite like that. You had to really fight your way up, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I was at Everton as a young kid and they signed me an apprentice at 16. I'd been on £16 a week, cleaning the boots, the toilets, the terraces, which they don't do anymore. And was let go at 18.
And that was Everton, yeah?
That was Everton, yeah. And, eventually they bought me back for £1 million. But it was a big journey to go back.
Being let go at 18, being your dream. I mean, there's an awful lot of young people go through this heartbreak, aren't there?
Yeah, and they're a lot younger now. Kids are there from a very young age. So when they're told that they're not good enough at 6, 7, 8 years of age...
Really?
That's what happens. And, at 18, I remember crying in my dad's arms when I got home, and he said, stick at it, son, you've got all the ability in the world. He said, you'll get stronger, you're only small. And that was one of the reasons why they let me go.
Was being a smallish guy a disadvantage?
Oh, obviously, yeah. But I got a lot stronger. With the strength, I got quicker. And I've always said this, I went and played non-league at a team called Northwich Victoria, and playing with proper men. So the 2 years playing in the conference as such, that made me the player I was.
Was it tough?
It was tough, yeah. But it was...
What, physically tough?
Yeah, very... You're playing with... I think the next youngest in the team was 28. So it's not like the academies now, you're playing against your own age group. You're playing against proper, solid performers. You know what I mean? So it helped me out a lot.
But in the end, you work your way back.
Yeah.
And you're playing, you played for some great clubs, didn't you?
Yeah, the Hammers. fantastic club. 85, 86 season, we finished third, played in every game. Should have won the league, really. It's the highest they've ever finished.
Yeah.
Liverpool won it, Everton was second, and we pushed the two Merseyside teams right to the wire, really. And I'm proud of being a part of that team. It was a fantastic team. When you think two players scored 58 goals between them, McAvenny and Cottee.
Yeah, Cottee,
It doesn't happen now. So, it's a terrific football team. And then I went to City.
Man City?
Yeah, went to City with Howard Kendall. And then that was only there 18 months, and then signed for the club. Who will love.
So the club that got rid of you pays $1 million to get you back.
Exactly. But it happens in football.
But that must have felt quite sweet.
It was, and I remember scoring 2 goals on my home debut. And when you think I'd been there since I was a baby, and then you're playing against the champions Arsenal, and I scored 2, a terrific goal from 25 yards past David Seaman. And I think my dad, who died a year before, I think he was there in spirit that night and blew 2 goals in for me. It was a fantastic feeling.
So Everton's deep within you, I guess.
Without a doubt, yeah. And they're struggling as well.
I'm going to say there's a slight problem with the owner, isn't there? A Russian owner.
Yes.
Because I mean Chelsea's up for sale.
Yeah.
So what's happening with Everton?
Well, it's plain and clear that they haven't invested in the right players. The recruitment has been awful. And it's like any business, whoever you bring in, if they're not good at their job or they're not up for it, your business is going to suffer. And, the recruitment has been absolutely dreadful. And, last night they were lucky to draw. Burnley play tonight. And they've got a lot of hard games coming to the end of the season.
And they're sort of 2/3 of the way down the table.
Well, they're just above the... so it's one of them. They say Everton don't go down because we've got the longest... history of being at the top level, but it does happen to big clubs.
So it's a really crucial few weeks.
It is, yeah. And it's, on the other hand, with West Ham, they're going for European glory. And, they've had a fantastic season, and David Moyes has come to the fore now. He started, they've given the job at the start of the season, 2 seasons ago, and he's just put a great squad together. And I feel sorry for him because he hasn't got a big squad, but what he's done, he's put a good team together, and they've been very consistent, and I think they can go all the way in this Europa League.
Interesting. Tell the football story that really touched me this week. And it wasn't Crystal Palace losing. But I'm a bit sad about that. But the football story that touched me this week was Wayne Rooney.
Yeah.
Rooney, a mega star, scored a lot of goals for England, went across to America, was immensely popular. Mm-hmm. When I was over in Washington, D.C., people were talking about Rooney, immensely popular. Gets into management, there he is with Derby. Managing Derby County, all sorts of problems, penalties. They've gone right down the leagues as a result of these penalties. And Rooney, presumably, could go off and get a big job somewhere. And yet he said he's going to stick with them.
Well, to me, that's susses him out as a person.
Yeah, I agree.
Because he's took a job that's really difficult. And he's going to learn, these couple of seasons he's going to have at Derby. And like some players get the best job straight away. But, he's learning his trade at a very difficult time and done a fantastic job. And I seen the clip where he was talking to the supporters saying, I'm not leaving you and we're going to go...
I thought it was terrific. For a guy that's been a megastar to accept where he is and say, no, we're going to fight back and do this was brilliant. Is football in healthy shape overall?
Well, financially, it would be great to play now. I'd rather have played when I played because I'd like to tackle and there was some great characters in the game.
But you earned good money.
Yeah, decent money, but I was a spender, Nigel, and I think that's what happened to me. I didn't plan for life after football, and a lot of players didn't. And we weren't on fantastic money like they are now, but it was
good money.
Yeah, good money, and that was the reason why I got into trouble.
So what happens, Mark? It ends. The career comes to an end, as inevitably it does.
Yeah.
And what, you start to find you're running out of money?
Yeah, because it's, I finished when I was 35, 36, went back into the non-league as a player manager at Altrincham.
And 35, 36 actually is quite a good age at top-flight football, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. And now the pitches are perfect, so the injuries aren't as much as, I don't think, as in our day. They do say the game's quicker, I'll argue that, but at the end of the day, if you don't prepare for life after football, if you're not involved coaching or management or in the media, it's a massive void that's gone from you because you have to be disciplined to play at the top level. You have to, make sure you go to bed early every night because you've got to be able to perform on a Saturday.
So what happens to Mark Ward then?
Well, in a nutshell, I made the decision that I'll always regret, and I chose to rent a property out for certain individuals, and they used that for stashing drugs. Never lived there, but I was caught up in a big operation with proper, villains really, and I always held my hands up. Pleaded guilty at the first opportunity. Couldn't really say who I rented the property to, because I wanted to, when I got out of prison, to be, not looking over my shoulder and protecting people.
These are bad guys, yeah?
Yeah. There was an operation on them called Operation Vatican, and drug dealers need places to store the drugs, and I made a decision. I'd just come back from Australia, my visa had gone out and I wanted to go back, and I made the decision to do that. 6 months, and I was caught up in it all, and I got 12 years really, and because I pleaded guilty, they gave me 8 and I'd done 4.
What was it like going to prison?
It was tough, yeah. The Liverpool prison was very tough, very brutal, very violent. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. No. It's a very, very brutal atmosphere in there, and you've got to be able to look after yourself. And I just, I realised I'd done something really wrong. Let myself down, my family and everybody else that knew me. And what I did do, I'd done my time as well as I could, done all the courses, got out there as soon as I could, and for the last 2 years I was in the open prison and I worked outside, so in the community. And
was it tougher on you being a known person?
Everybody knew me, so I think when you're in prison you're just a number.
In Liverpool,
yeah. You're just a number, and I'll always remember that number to the day I die. And so I was NM6982, but everyone knew me because I was the Premier League footballer, but you don't know who the guy next to you is in the cell or whatever. So in some aspects it was easier for me.
And how have you managed to pull your life back together again after that?
Well, I just said to you, I was with a person who's been on this show, Thomas Skinner, me and Tom. We played golf a few years back, and we've just gone into a coffee business.
Yeah.
Bosch Coffee.
Yep.
This might be Bosch Lager. So he's got Bosch Bed. He's just a great guy. He's over in Ireland.
He was wonderful when he came on.
And you know what? He's been on The Apprentice and he's been on MasterChef, and he'll probably be in the jungle at Christmas. I don't know, but he's a great guy to work for, and we're just trying to push our coffee all around the country.
So you've fallen in with the right guy now?
The right guy who works tirelessly. I've never known anyone work as much as him, and we live close to each other, and we're doing really well.
So what, Mark, looking back on it all, you had to fight damned hard to get to become a Premier League footballer. You got there, you had a successful career, some great moments. You suffer, I guess, public humiliation in the end by going to prison. What's the moral of a story for young footballers out there today?
So plan after your career's over. Now, if you're at the top level, you learn a lot of money these days. But
you can still blow it, can't you?
Oh, of course you can, yeah. No, it's like anything. I think gambling's still a big problem in football. It was in my day. And if you're...
Were you gambling?
Everyone did in the dressing room, maybe about 2. We always had a bet. We had a bookie in the dressing room. Alan Devonshire was our bookie. It was just a footballer's disease.
I shouldn't laugh, really. No.
It was a footballer's disease, Nigel, it was.
Yeah.
And, but now, because of the apps and everything else, we used to have to go to bookies to put the bets on.
Now it's even easier, isn't it?
Well, it's easy, yeah. And it's like in proportion to what you're earning. So, I think that's one of the main concerns about me in the football with the youngsters, really.
Planning for afterwards, putting some money aside, being sensible.
Put it in your pension.
All the things that young people aren't very good at doing in many ways. But it's an important lesson. Mark Ward, thank you for telling your story.
Thanks,
and joining me on Talking Pints. Thank you.
Very much.
We are coming up towards the end of the show. It is time for Barrage the Farage. But I'm sure there are going to be some questions coming in for Mark, so he's staying with me. A viewer asks, here we go, do you think footballers are paid too much for what they do? Are they paid too much, Mark?
I think some of them are. Especially some of them Everton players at the moment.
An ex-player is always going to say they're paid too much. It's as simple as that. Michael asks, have the big football clubs lost touch with the fans? That's interesting.
Yes, I think they have. Like, I'm in Lion Regis tomorrow evening, Lion Regis Football Club, so I'm going to do an after dinner there. So players in my generation will still, go out there. But I can imagine, like, in a couple of years' time, the players that have earned millions, they're not going to bother going out to the social clubs or going out to the...
So the grassroots gets a bit disconnected, you mean, from...
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the money that they're on, and, there is that big gap now between the fans and the players, and it's only because of the money.
Yeah, it's a shame. Craig asks, does the possibility of a coalition government with Labour and the SNP worry you? Look, all I will say to you is this. I would have been very worried about a coalition of the SNP and Jeremy Corbyn. Goodness only knows what they might have done to us. But Keir Starmer, and you may say he's boring. I wouldn't invite him for dinner on a Saturday night, and you'd probably be right. But maybe boring is what people are going to want after all the turbulence that we've been through in politics over the last few years. He has dealt with the left. He's not scary. Am I really, really afraid of a Labour-led government in coalition with the SNP? I'm not that afraid of it. And that's why the Tories have really got to get moving and got to convince people they've got economic answers, because so many millions are hard up out there. Time running short. Robbie asks me, do you think that Putin's Satan II missile launch was a sign of weakness or strength? I can't quite work out the truth of really what's going on in Ukraine. All I know is that he is desperate for a win before he gets to the 9th of May, when they celebrate the end of the Great Patriotic War, known to us as World War II. So maybe it's a sign of weakness, but I fear there's going to be some really horrid stuff happening in eastern Ukraine over the next few weeks. I'm done for the day. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Mark Stein joins in a moment. First, though, let's have a look at the all-important weather.
Good evening. I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Dry for many tonight, but we will see some low cloud mist and murk developing. But the main noticeable feature will be the strength of the wind. It will really start to increase over the next 24 hours. The reason for this is low pressure to the south of the UK, high to the north. That's allowing a squeeze in the isobars across the UK. Winds coming in from the east, very noticeable as we go through Friday. Back to Thursday evening, lots of clear skies overhead, some mist and murk though developing along the east, and this slowly drifts westwards as we go through the night. Some drizzle possible in the thickest cloud, but most places staying dry. Under the clearest skies, temperatures dipping to mid-single figures, so a chilly start to Friday morning. But a mixed start. There will be some sunshine, but some low cloud mist and murk. This should lift and break for many. However, we will see some low cloud and thick cloud moving westwards across southern parts of England and Wales. This will produce some showery rain as it moves westwards, 1 or 2 heavier bursts possible, but further north, plenty of sunshine to come. Perhaps some low cloud across some coastal areas of Scotland, northeast England. Here with that brisk wind, temperatures struggling 11, 12 degrees, but in the sunshine in the west, 15 or 16 degrees. Through the evening, the cloud and showers should move away across the far south, but it'll only be replaced by low cloud and drizzle moving in from the North Sea, particularly over the higher ground, quite murky conditions developing. A few clear spells which will allow temperatures to fall into single figures, but for many, a cloudier start to Saturday morning, a grey start. There'll be a few spits and spots of rain initially, but perhaps this becoming more frequent as we go through the day, 1 or 2 heavier bursts possible as it all moves in from the North Sea. But there will be some sunshine that develops, where it does highs of 15, 16, possibly 17 Celsius. That continues through the rest of the weekend, often cloudy, best of the sunshine in the west, but turning cooler by Monday.
It's the mainstream media's worst nightmare.